He gave his last dollar to a stranger, never knowing it would change his entire world. Before we find out what happens, take a moment to subscribe to our channel for more stories that will restore your faith in humanity. The rain fell in sheets, a relentless, weeping gray that blurred the world outside the diner window. Inside the daily grind, the only sound was the weary hum of the old refrigerator and the rhythmic drip of a leak near the kitchen door. Marcus Jackson stared at the stack of envelopes on the counter, each one a paper cut to his dwindling hope. Past due. Final notice. The words swam before his tired eyes. He ran a hand over his face, the rough texture of his calloused skin a testament to 16-hour days that yielded less and less. The diner, his father's legacy and his own dream, was bleeding out. Outside, the neon open sign, missing the P and half the N, flickered erratically, a perfect symbol for the state of his life. It sputtered, went dark, then flared back to life with a defiant buzz, a brief, desperate pulse in the encroaching night. He'd have to get on the ladder and fix it again tomorrow, assuming there was a tomorrow for the diner. He glanced toward the back room, where his 7-year-old daughter Maya was asleep on a small cot, her small form a bundle of trust in a world that felt anything but trustworthy. Everything he did, every ounce of sweat and worry, was for her, and he was failing. The thought was a cold, heavy stone in his gut, heavier than the debt, heavier than the exhaustion. Poverty wasn't just an absence of money. It was a constant, crushing weight, an impersonal antagonist that stole your breath and clouded your vision. He was about to turn off the flickering sign and surrender to the night when the front door chimed weakly. An elderly woman stumbled in, drenched and gasping, one hand clutching the lapel of her soaked but clearly expensive coat. The other pressed hard against her chest. Her face was pale as bone china, her silver hair plastered to her forehead by the storm. She looked around, her eyes wide with a mixture of pain and panic, before her legs gave way. Marcus moved without thinking. He vaulted over the counter, his own fatigue forgotten, and caught her just before she hit the floor. He eased her into the nearest booth, his movements gentle despite the adrenaline surging through him. "Ma'am, are you okay? Can you hear me?" She nodded weakly, her breath coming in ragged, shallow bursts. "Chest, can't breathe," she wheezed, her fingers tightening on her sternum. The clinical, detached part of his brain that had absorbed a dozen medical dramas recognized the signs instantly. The pale, clammy skin, the radiating pain, the fight for air. His heart hammered against his ribs. He was closed. He was broke. Calling an ambulance was a risk. A false alarm could mean a bill he couldn't afford, drawing attention he didn't want. But looking at the woman's terrified, pleading eyes, there was no choice. Humanity wasn't a transaction. "Hang on," he said, his voice calmer than he felt. "I'm calling for help." He pulled his worn cell phone from his pocket. The screen cracked but functional, and dialed 911. As he relayed the information to the dispatcher, his eyes scanned the woman. She looked so fragile, so vulnerable, a stark contrast to the storm raging outside and the one raging inside him. The dispatcher's voice was crisp and professional. "Sir, if you have any aspirin, have her chew one. Do not let her swallow it whole." Aspirin. He didn't have any. His first aid kit was a roll of paper towels and some old bandages, but the all-night convenience store next door sold single-dose packets. He looked in the cash register. One crumpled $5 bill and a few coins lay inside. His last cash. Maya's milk money for the morning. He didn't hesitate. "I'll be right back," he told the woman, squeezing her cold hand. "Don't you worry. Help is on the way." He grabbed the $5 bill, ran out into the blinding rain, and returned a moment later, soaked to the bone, clutching a small packet of 2 aspirin tablets. He helped her chew one, the bitter taste making her grimace. But she did it. While they waited, the diner was filled with an unnerving silence, broken only by the woman's labored breathing and the relentless drumming of the rain. Marcus sat across from her in the booth, holding her frail, icy hand in his warm, strong ones. He talked to her, his voice a low, steady murmur. He didn't know if she was even processing the words, but the silence felt more dangerous. "My name is Marcus," he said softly, "and this is my place. Well, it was my dad's first. He taught me how to make the best pancakes on this side of the state. Said the secret wasn't in the batter, but in flipping them for someone you care about." He glanced toward the back room. "My daughter Maya, she's 7. She loves the chocolate chip ones. Says they look like they have freckles." The woman's breathing seemed to even out slightly. Her eyes, a startlingly clear blue, were fixed on his face. They held a universe of pain, but also a flicker of something else. Intense, focused gratitude. She tried to speak, but only a faint rasp emerged. He just shook his head. "Don't you try to talk. Just breathe. That's your only job right now. Just breathe." From her perspective, the world was a terrifying blur of pain and disorientation. But through the fog, she saw him. She saw the deep lines of exhaustion etched around his kind eyes, the worn collar of his shirt, the way his hands, though rough, were impossibly gentle. In her world of corporate sharks and calculating heirs, this pure, unhesitating kindness was a foreign language she hadn't heard spoken in decades. It was raw, real, and offered with no expectation of reward. The wail of the siren grew from a distant cry to a piercing shriek. 2 paramedics burst in, their movements efficient and practiced. They descended upon the woman with questions and equipment, and just like that, the quiet intimacy of the booth was shattered. As they loaded her onto the gurney, her eyes found Marcus one last time. She opened her mouth, her lips forming a single, silent word he couldn't decipher. Then she was gone, wheeled out into the flashing red and blue lights that sliced through the darkness before the ambulance sped away, its siren fading back into the sound of the storm. Marcus stood in the doorway, the rain misting his face, the empty aspirin packet on the table, and the empty cash register a quiet testament to the night's events. He was left with nothing but the lingering chill of her hand and a profound sense of having done the right thing, even if it was the hardest thing. 3 days passed. The rain stopped, but the gloom over the daily grind remained. The brief, adrenaline-fueled sense of purpose Marcus had felt was replaced by the familiar, gnawing anxiety. The diner remained empty. A few regulars had stopped by, but their sympathetic glances and small orders couldn't pay the mountain of bills. He was serving a watery coffee to his one customer of the morning when the bell on the door chimed with a sound that made his stomach clench. Mr. Henderson, the owner of the building, strode in. He was a man whose physical form seemed to perfectly match his personality. Soft in the middle, with a hard, polished surface. He wore a suit that was too tight and a smile that never reached his cold, assessing eyes. He didn't greet Marcus. He simply slid a folded document across the counter. "Jackson," Henderson said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Consider this your final courtesy." Marcus unfolded the paper, though he already knew what it was. Eviction notice. The words were stark, brutal. 3 months of back rent, plus late fees due in 7 days. An impossible sum. Mr. Henderson, I just need a little more time. Business has been slow, but it'll pick up. Henderson let out a short, humorless laugh. Time? I've given you time. I've listened to your excuses. This isn't a charity, Jackson. It's a business. You have 1 week to pay in full, or you and your kid are out. I've already got a new tenant lined up. A franchise. Someone who can actually pay the rent. He glanced around the worn-out diner with a dismissive sneer. This place is a relic. It's time for an upgrade. He turned and walked out, leaving the notice on the counter like a verdict. The paper felt heavy as a tombstone in Marcus's hand. 1 week. 7 days until his world and Maya's collapsed completely. The next few days were a blur of quiet despair. Marcus began packing boxes in the small apartment behind the diner, a slow, heartbreaking process of dismantling his life. Each object held a memory. The chipped mug his father used to drink from, the crayon drawing from Maya taped to the fridge, the worn-out armchair where he read her bedtime stories. Maya, sensing his distress, tried to help, carefully placing her stuffed animals into a box with a solemnity that broke his heart. Her innocence was a bright, painful light in his suffocating darkness. "Are we going on an adventure, Daddy?" she asked, her big brown eyes wide with curiosity. He forced a smile, the muscles in his face aching with the effort. "Something like that, sweetie." He was taping up a box of kitchen supplies when the sleek black sedan pulled up in front of the diner. It was so out of place on his run-down street that it might as well have been a spaceship. A man in a perfectly tailored gray suit emerged and walked to the door, his polished shoes clicking on the pavement. He entered the diner, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on Marcus. "Mr. Marcus Jackson?" the man asked, his voice polite and professional. "That's me," Marcus said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "My name is Arthur Pembroke. I am the personal assistant to Miss Eleanor Vance." The name meant nothing to Marcus. Arthur continued, "You assisted her during a medical emergency a few nights ago." The elderly woman. The memory came rushing back. Is she okay?" Marcus asked, his concern genuine. "She is recovering, thanks in no small part to your quick thinking," Arthur said. "Ms. Vance is a woman who believes that all debts must be paid, both financial and moral." He produced a crisp, white envelope from his breast pocket and handed it to Marcus. "She asked me to give you this." Marcus opened it. Inside was a check made out to him for $5,000. It was enough to cover the ambulance fees he'd worried about, his immediate bills, and more. Tucked beside it was a small, cream-colored card with elegant, shaky handwriting. "Thank you for the aspirin and the kindness," it read. "They were more valuable than you know. E.V." Marcus stared at the check, then at the note. $5,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a lifeline. It was a breath of air when he was drowning. "Please tell her thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say." "There's no need to say anything," Arthur replied with a small, knowing smile. "Just know that Ms. Vance is very particular. She notices things." With a nod, Arthur turned and walked back to the waiting car, leaving Marcus standing in the middle of his half-packed life, holding a small piece of paper that felt like a miracle. The next morning, Marcus stood in line at the bank, the check clutched in his hand. This was it. This was the money that would appease Henderson, that would keep the lights on, that would keep a roof over Maya's head. It was a temporary fix, but it was a fix. As he neared the teller, he overheard a quiet, desperate conversation from the loan officer's desk nearby. It was the Garcia family. Their son, Leo, was in Maya's class, and they owned the small bakery down the street. He'd heard whispers they were struggling too. "I'm sorry, Mr. Garcia," the loan officer was saying, his voice full of practiced regret. "Without more collateral, the bank simply can't extend you another loan." Mrs. Garcia started to cry softly, her husband putting a comforting arm around her. "But Henderson is going to evict us," Mr. Garcia pleaded. "Our family has run that bakery for 50 years. We just need one more month to get back on our feet." Marcus's heart sank. Henderson. Of course. The man was a vulture, preying on the entire neighborhood. Marcus looked at the check in his hand, his lifeline. Then he looked at the Garcias, their faces a mirror of the same despair he had felt just yesterday. He saw their son's face in his mind, playing with Maya at the school park. He thought of his father's words, about flipping pancakes for someone you care about. What good was saving himself if he stood by and watched his neighbors drown? His conscience wouldn't allow it. He walked out of the line, strode to the teller, and cashed the entire check. The stack of $100 bills felt foreign and powerful in his hand. He walked over to the Garcia's desk. They looked up, their eyes red-rimmed and hopeless. "Mr. and Mrs. Garcia," he said softly. They looked at him, confused. He counted out $3,000 and held it out to them. "This should be enough to keep Henderson off your back for a little while." Mr. Garcia stared at the money, then at Marcus, his jaw slack with disbelief. "Jackson. Marcus. We can't take this." "Yes, you can," Marcus insisted, pressing the money into his hand. "Your son and my daughter are friends. That makes us neighbors. And neighbors help each other. Just pay it forward when you can." He gave them a firm nod, turned around, and walked out of the bank before they could protest further, leaving him with just enough to pay 1 month's rent, but not the crushing arrears. He had used his miracle to help someone else, seemingly throwing away his only chance. He had passed a final, unseen test. The day of the eviction arrived like a death sentence. The last box was taped. Maya sat on the packed-up cot, clutching her favorite teddy bear, her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Marcus's own heart felt like a lead weight. He had failed. The knock on the door came right on time. He opened it to find Mr. Henderson, a locksmith standing behind him, a triumphant smirk on his face. "Time's up, Jackson," Henderson said, holding up a set of new keys. "I'll try not to enjoy this too much." Just as the locksmith stepped forward to begin drilling out the old lock, the sound of rumbling engines filled the street. Several large construction trucks, the kind used for major renovations, pulled up and parked, blocking the road. Men in hard hats and tool belts began to file out, looking at the diner with professional interest. Henderson looked confused, then annoyed. "What is this? You can't park. Here!" A moment later, the sleek, black sedan reappeared, gliding to a silent stop behind the trucks. Arthur Pembroke got out and opened the rear door. Eleanor Vance emerged. She was no longer the pale, gasping woman from the diner. She stood tall, leaning lightly on a silver-handled cane, but her blue eyes were sharp and commanding. She radiated an aura of immense power. She completely ignored Henderson, her gaze fixed on Marcus. "Mr. Jackson," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I apologize for the intrusion. I believe we have some business to discuss." Henderson sputtered, stepping between them. "Who do you think you are? This is my property. I'm evicting this man." Eleanor finally turned her gaze to him, and it was like being hit by a blast of Arctic air. "Mr. Henderson," she said coolly, "you are mistaken. As of 9 o'clock this morning, when my attorneys closed the deal, this entire block, including this building, is my property. You are trespassing." She held out a hand, and Arthur placed a sheaf of legal documents in it. She handed one to the stunned landlord. "Your services," she said, with a dismissive wave at the locksmith, "are no longer required." She then turned back to Marcus, her expression softening. She took the eviction notice from his nerveless fingers and tore it in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces flutter to the ground. "My assistant Arthur is very thorough," she explained. "He informed me of your financial difficulties. He also informed me of your visit to the bank and your subsequent, and quite frankly reckless, generosity toward the Garcia family." A warm smile touched her lips. "I told you, Mr. Jackson. I am a woman who pays her debts. You saved my life. And then, when given a lifeline, you used it to save someone else. That is a debt that cannot be repaid with a simple check." She gestured to the construction crew. "These men are here for you. We are going to renovate this diner from top to bottom. New kitchen, new furniture, new everything. Whatever you need." As Marcus stared, speechless, another of Eleanor's associates, a woman in a business suit, stepped forward with a portfolio. "Mr. Jackson," she said, "Ms. Vance has also established a fully funded educational trust for your daughter, Maya. It will cover her schooling from now through any postgraduate degree she chooses to pursue." Just then, the Garcias came running down the street, having seen the commotion. Eleanor turned to them. "And Mr. and Mrs. Garcia," she said, as another associate handed them a folder. "Ms. Vance has also taken the liberty of purchasing your bakery's building. The deed is inside. It is yours, free and clear. Consider your mortgage paid in full." The couple burst into tears, this time of joy, embracing each other and then turning to a completely overwhelmed Marcus. The following weeks were a whirlwind of positive transformation. The grimy, failing diner was gutted and reborn. The flickering sign was replaced by a warm, welcoming neon script that read, "Maya's Place." The leaky roof was fixed, the floors were polished, and a state-of-the-art kitchen was installed. Word of what happened had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Mr. Henderson became a local pariah, his greed exposed, while Marcus was hailed as a hero. The grand reopening of Maya's Place was an event. The entire community showed up. The diner was filled with laughter and the delicious smell of pancakes and fresh coffee. The Garcias, their own bakery now thriving, provided all the pastries, their faces beaming with gratitude. Marcus moved through the crowd, no longer a man burdened by worry, but a confident and happy business owner, a pillar of his community. He saw Maya sitting in a brand new corner booth, showing a picture book to Eleanor Vance. The billionaire, who could be anywhere in the world, had become a regular, a quiet, smiling fixture in the corner, a surrogate grandmother to the little girl whose father had saved her life. This was his new family, forged not by blood, but by a single act of kindness in a storm. 1 year later, Maya's Place was more than a diner. It was the vibrant heart of a revitalized neighborhood. Marcus, wiping the counter with a clean cloth, watched as Maya, now 8, carefully explained the rules of a card game to Eleanor. The two of them were sharing a slice of apple pie, Eleanor listening with rapt attention. He caught her eye and she gave him a small, warm smile, a look of deep, unspoken understanding that passed between them. He looked down at his own hands. The calluses were still there, but they were no longer the marks of desperate toil. They were the hands of a man who built a life, who provided for his daughter, who served his community. He thought back to that rainy night, to the crumpled $5 bill in the cash register, the last money to his name. He had learned that the truest wealth isn't what you keep, but what you give away. For kindness is a currency that always returns, with interest. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales that prove goodness always finds its way back home.